meeting. My name is Andy Hoagland. I'm a Select Board member in Williamstown and this year's president of the MSA. But I want to introduce my fellow MSA board members before going in. If they're here, please stand. Deborah Roberts, Jennifer Glass, Christine Hoyt, Jill Hay, Steve Carvey, and Erwin Messop, which I saw someplace. Great, thank you for doing this. And Peter Spelios, who is also on the board, is not able to be here today either. We've been having a lot of programming this year, trying to make up for the losses during COVID. We had a rural and Western Massachusetts conference in April. We had a newly elected select board training in June with over 100 people showing up. And we had a webinar on affordable housing. We also, apropos of yesterday's news, in the fall, the governor asked cities and towns and everybody else what you wanted to do to make municipal operations better. This board put together 9 pages of that, and a lot of those ideas seem to be in what got released yesterday in the Municipal Empowerment Act. So we'll continue that advocacy going forward. And all these things are not possible without the MMA staff, which is always among us and consistently amazing. So thanks to them as well. And later on, we'll be talking about one of our other accomplishments for the year, which is the unveiling of the new updated online searchable MSA handbook. But first, part of business, though, is for re-election of officers for next year. So Josh Ostroff, who's our head of the nominating committee, is in charge of that operation. Josh?
Thank you so much, Andy. It's my pleasure to serve on the nominating committee and to give you our report. I'd like to acknowledge the following committee members: Easton Select Board Chair Dottie Fulginiti, Deerfield Select Board Member Carolyn Shores-Ness, MSA past president, former Westwood Select Board Member Michael Walsh. I retired from the Natick Select Board, but I appreciate the opportunity to serve with my colleagues and to serve you. So my thanks to all of them for their hard work and commitment to the nominating process over the last year. I also want to acknowledge Candace Pierce, the Senior Executive for Communications Membership, and Annika Craig, MMA Program Coordinator, for their great assistance in this process. According to the bylaws of the MSA, district reps are elected for 2-year terms, and officers, that's the MSA President, First Vice President, Second Vice President, and Secretary are each elected for 1-year terms. A wrinkle this year was that we had a vacancy in District 5, so we're also electing someone to serve the 2nd year of that term, and a vacancy was elected in District 2, which was resulted from the nomination of our current Secretary, the nomination of the outgoing President, Jill Hay, as Second Vice President. Jill had been in District 2. So we're really gratified by all the interest of you Select Board members to serve on the board of the MSA. It's your leadership and stewardship that helps propel the association forward. It's a difficult process. We have so many qualified people that apply, and we try to have a balance of experience and veteran leadership on the board and the new perspectives that so many of you bring. But thank you to all who applied for these positions, and we certainly encourage you to consider doing so in the future. So the nominating committee is recommending the following slate of officers for the 2024 MSA board, and as I call your name, kindly stand. For President, Andy Hoagland of Williamstown. First Vice President, Deborah Roberts of Stoughton. Second Vice President, Jill Hay of Lexington. Secretary, Mark Forrest of Yarmouth. And the District 5 Rep, Aaron Langlois of Oakham. District 2 Rep, Jennifer Glass of Lincoln. I would like to entertain a motion to elect the recommended slate. Is there a second? Thank you. Any other motions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Any opposed? And any abstentions? The motion is approved, and thank you so much. Congratulations to the newly elected members for the 2024. Congratulations to the newly elected members of the MSA board. In addition to these individuals, the following district reps will continue their 2-year terms in 2024. May sound familiar because Eddie just acknowledged them a minute ago. Christine White of Adams, Stephen Cavey of Stoughton, Erwin Nessoff of Hull. So you should keep an eye on your email from the MMA in the coming weeks for formal introduction to these board members. Before moving on with the program, I'd just like to recognize Peter Spelios, the Swampscott Select Board member. He was the 2020 MSA second vice president. Thanking him for his service to the MSA and the MMA. He's not able to join us today, but we're very grateful for his service to the board and the association. Thank you so much.
Right, you working from up here?
Thank you, Josh, for that, and I'm delighted to be able to do this work another year, especially with the team that's I've been working with so far, and look forward to the new members. I am very happy to be helping to unveil the 2024 edition of the Massachusetts Select Board Handbook. The last handbook was 10 years old, in paper, very heavy, hard to find, not searchable, so times have changed. I'd really like to extend our thanks to Josh, who you just met, Allison Devon, who's here in the chair next to me, formerly of the Norwell Select Board, and John Willett of the MMA amazing staff, who actually webified the whole thing. So we're delighted to have all of that. And also to Candace Pierce, I don't think is here, Meredith Garabowska, and Annika, who's here, Annika Craig is here, who helped out, and her predecessor, Nicole, Isabel Jenkins, sorry, was also very helpful. So I will pass these over to Josh to talk more about the introduction to this program, and then Allison and then John, you can just take turns and move on.
Thanks, Andy. Hi, Deb. So I first want to acknowledge the dedication of this handbook to the late Worthington Select Board member, Steve Kulik, who is the MSA president and MMA president and state representative from Western Massachusetts. He was a loyal champion of local government. He served on the Worthington Planning Board and later the Select Board for 45 years, as well as a mentor and friend to many. We're honored to dedicate the Select Board to him in recognition of his legacy in public service. I'd like to now ask Allison to come up to give an overview of the revision process and our intentions for the resource that we had.
Thanks, Josh. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here. And good morning. It's great to be here with all of you. Some of you may be familiar with this Selectmen's Handbook. This is the old version that was last printed in 2014. The MMA knew it was time for an update, if for no other reason that the majority of our towns are run by select boards now, not boards of selectmen. But more than that, the broad range of topics that select board members must be familiar with grows all the time, and when you couple that with ever-changing policy and legal modifications, some of the content had become outdated. So when our committee began the process of updating the handbook 2 years ago, our first step was to send out a survey to ask the MMA membership if and how people used the Selectmen's Handbook. So we had 135 responses, so thank you to any of you who responded. Of those who responded, 68% were select board members, but the rest were municipal employees and town administrators, finance committees, etc. And so we realized that the resource isn't just relevant to select board members and that we should aim to make it available to a wider audience. Also, this printed version is a bit of a beast. It has a ton of good information, but it is so dense, and because of that, it's overwhelming and can be a little intimidating to access for especially new board members. So we wanted the new version to be more dynamic and more accessible. We wanted it to be searchable and to be able to be updated in real time. So with these ideas in mind, we reimagined the format and decided to create the online version that could live as its own searchable resource right on the MMA website. So as we began the editing process, we collaborated with many municipal government experts to help us update the relevant content. Again, thank you to anyone who is here today that helped with that. We also considered that a lot has changed in 10 years. So we added new chapters on DEI and climate change, and also a new section on strategic planning and goal setting. We also, thanks to the feedback provided in the survey, we added more information and guidance on ethics, open meeting law, affordable housing, codes of conduct, and maintaining decorum. So with that introduction, I'd like to now invite John Willett to the podium to give a demonstration. John served as the chief editor of our handbook project group and worked with the web designer, and they did a phenomenal job. As someone who would always choose a book over a Kindle, I was originally hesitant about the online-only format, but I am absolutely a convert, and I hope you will be too. So thank you to everyone who is involved in this project, and take it away, John.
Thank you, Allison. Good morning, everyone. I also want to start by giving a shout out to my colleague Meredith. I'm not going to ask her to stand because she's already standing. She's right over there. So she and I are a team on the website and all our digital communications. So this is a big step forward, not just for, I think, for the MSA, but for the MMA as well. This is a great educational resource, so why don't we take it for a test drive? So the first thing that I want to talk about is where you can find it. So there are two key routes to go, and that is to go to your member page, the Select Board page, and you'll see a prominent link there, right here. And the other is resources. So we want to really bring this forward for all of our members to be able to find it easily. And here it is. So this is what we call the landing page. It's, or preface and overview. This is where you would find I'm used to a different type of mouse, so I might do that a bunch, sorry. The dedication, which Josh talked about, and the acknowledgement to Jeff, our previous executive director who really got behind this project with us, and the credits, people who were involved in the project. That, for most people is, they'll read it once and not really need to see it every time that they come to the handbook. So we did a read more and close. So I'll start with the navigation. So all your chapters are on this left-hand side here, and these menus are collapsible. So these would be the categories within each of the chapters. So licenses and permits, for example. It's going to pop you right over not only to that chapter, which is chapter 4, but to that topic heading. So it's going to drill down for you to the area that you're looking for. If it's adult use marijuana, there you are. So, and then over on the right-hand side, it knows which chapter you're in and also gives you these navigation tools that'll jump you around to the various topics within that chapter. You could also use it to go to the next chapter. This is also collapsible if you feel like you want a wider page, and then you can bring it back. So the great thing about the menu is that we have it locked in place. So some of these chapters, it's a whole chapter of content, get fairly long, but your navigation tools are never on the right and the left, are never going to leave you behind. So, and then we've highlighted resources that are relevant to each of the chapters at the bottom. They're mentioned in the text, but if, it's helpful to have them all in one place, they're right there. We also have a last updated, since this is a dynamic publication, and we will be doing updates on a rolling basis. you can see when any of the chapters have changes. Some of those changes could be relatively minor, and in some cases we could add a whole new section, but we have that flexibility, and that's the important part. The search function, I think, is going to be a really helpful tool. Let's say, for example, we search for procurement. This is searching only within the MSA handbook. So it's an isolated search engine. It's essentially a modern day version of an index. So any term that you could think of, you can search. It's going to give you results with the word highlighted, and it's going to show you a passage. And then you can make decisions about whether that's really the mention of procurement that you're looking for. So it's going to identify which chapter, because procurement's bound to show up in a number of places. So, but it gives you a couple of options over here as well. If you wanted to narrow your search, you could click one of these boxes. You know you just want chapter 13, for example. But if it's not delivering the resources that you're looking for, or if you want more, you can search all of MMA.org. So that flexibility is built right into the search tool. This resource is mobile friendly, so smartphones and tablets, we've been testing it, it's working well there. So really, anywhere you can find Google, you can find the MSA handbook. It's free and open to everyone. We hope that even other groups, because a lot of the topics are very relevant to all of our other groups, that they'll find it to be a helpful resource, but also members of the public, if they want to have a better understanding of the roles and responsibilities of select board members, they can find it here. So it really dovetails nicely with the MMA's overall efforts as a public education organization to help people understand local government better. We did work on accessibility and have checked that so that screen readers, we know that it's working for folks who need to use readers. And then I think the last thing that I'll mention, and then we can open it up for questions, is that we have a feedback form that's built into this. The key thing for me to this is that this form is specific to the MSA handbook. So if you see anything that's maybe gone out of date, or if you see something that you would like the book to cover that you don't find in it, or just if you have questions, this is going to go directly to the key members of the team who work on this project and will be working on it on an ongoing basis. So I think that about covers it. I hope you'll spend some time exploring it, and I'd be happy to take questions.
Hi, Mary Beth Mitz, Lenox, Massachusetts.
Good morning.
This is a fantastic resource. I'm really excited to get into it. I think a really great addition would be some kind of a wiki type of pod that people could put case study experiences. So if you have experience in affordable housing, you could put information about how your town dealt with affordable housing, or a procurement issue that was particular, like with the stuff they were talking about yesterday with regard to emergency preparedness and trying to have contractors set up prior to emergencies occurring, stuff like that. I think this is a great resource. Thank you all so much for all of your hard work on this.
Thank you. Appreciate the suggestion. We'll definitely talk about that.
Good
Hi,
morning.
good morning.
Same, I want to ditto the thanks for all of the hard work that the committee put into this and making it available online. I wanted to also know, is there a way to download all of it from the website?
It's not optimized for printing. The idea is that it's changing constantly. It's an evolving document, so it's not something that at any moment in time you could print out and be sure what the shelf life would be. So the advantage of being able to update it continually, you know, does not lend itself to printing, if that's what you're thinking of.
I was thinking about like a downloadable version of it that you could highlight, that you could discuss, something like that. Yeah. But
I
thank you.
think, yeah, I mean, you know, obviously you can print a particular page or section as you would any other web page, but it's not optimized for it. Thank you.
Good morning.
Hi.
Lisa Lessard-Pearson, Belchertown. And this actually dovetails on the last person who asked a question, and that is, when you update, would there be a headline or is there an opportunity to say, this is what's changed from the last time you read it?
Yeah.
Because especially if it's a law or anything new or something that perhaps you find out, oh, nope, it wasn't exactly that.
Right.
We have no way of knowing. All
Right.
we know is it's just been
Yeah.
updated.
Right.
By the way, fantastic job.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, so we have thought about that. We have talked about it. We haven't got sort of a technological tool that really accomplishes that, but we will be, you know, on a regular basis, putting articles in the Beacon or on our website if it's a major update for sure. And then we'll talk about, you know, whether you know, an informs an email to select board members would make sense. We do want to keep you apprised and not, you know, you shouldn't have to look at those last updated dates all the time to see. There will be a range of updates. A new section, that's certainly noteworthy. Correcting a typo, obviously, we're not going to let you all know. Of course, there are no typos, but if there were one to fix. So, yeah, so, you know, we're going to continually keep you updated. You'll hear about it at MSA meetings. I think it's going to become sort of a regular topic with the group.
A suggestion, in where it was last updated, you know, a button that you could click that says, this is what's changed. It's just a suggestion to think about. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Looks like we have to wrap. Okay, thank you.
Hi, before you leave, I had one more question. It was over in the corner. I really like the idea that you have the table of contents and you can drill down on information. But my question, a couple of months ago, you asked select board members to provide pictures of different things. Is that also in this version or is that in another version of the handbook?
It's in this version. It's sort of, to some degree, it's a work in progress that we'll be continuing to. We wanted to get to launch for this meeting. So they're not all there, but there are quite a few of the photos in there, yes. And I think we'll be continuing to add to that.
Oh, great, thank you.
Thank you.
So, as we noted, one of the new chapters in the book is on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and apropos of that, we have together, and I'm pleased to have him here today, Bert Guess, who is the CEO of the Racial Equity Group. He'll be our final presenter for today. Bert has over a decade of experience delivering innovative diversity, equity, and inclusion training strategies. Since September, he's been working with MMA on with their DEI committee to develop a plan for MMI to do advancing DEI efforts in local governments across the state. And today he'll be discussing the best practices for select boards to gauge their municipalities' needs and initiate some DEI work. So thank you, Bert, for coming in. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Pleasure to be here and really share with you all this morning on this topic, diversity, equity, inclusion. I know we heard a lot about it yesterday with Eddie Glaude speaking to it, Adam speaking to it, Jill as well. You heard a lot of discussion related to diversity, equity, inclusion. And let me say this to kind of start this off. There are a lot of strong opinions on DEI now. This last couple of years, there have been a lot of strong opinions. My instincts tell me that there are a lot of you in here that really are for DEI, you really champion it, you believe in it. But my instincts also tell me that there are some of you who have just sort of mixed feelings about it. You've heard different sides and maybe you're not really sure. And then there may be some of you who really are not for DEI, and that's okay. We're all human beings. My goal is to come not to really give you my opinion, but I like to say that I want to just share with you some facts and data, because I think that people that have these strong opinions, a lot of times they don't necessarily have the facts and the data. And so for a moment, what I want you to do is just to kind of get DEI just out of your mind for a moment, as servant leaders of all the different municipalities. And it's really important just to kind of ask yourself a question before you think about DEI, because the word now, a lot of times for some people, it has a certain connotation to it. But if you really ask yourself, a key question here is I'm going to share with you, ask yourself this question instead of asking yourself whether or not you're for DEI. Ask yourself, are all of your stakeholders being served equitably? Now, we have to do some homework, some definitions here for a moment. What does equitable really mean? When you think about equitable and equality, these are two different concepts. First of all, there's something called a disparity. A disparity is just a numerical difference. For example, there are gender disparities in terms of compensation all throughout the United States. We know that. You've heard the phrase, men, for every $1 a man makes, women may make 80 cents, right? We've heard that. Now, it's okay to have disparities. We have gender disparities, right? Differences. We have racial disparities. You may have disparities for people for different sexual orientations, age, when it comes to pay, or when it comes to promotions, when it comes to being awarded contracts. You'll see these numerical differences between demographic groups. We call those disparities. Now, sometimes disparities happen by accident, just a coincidence. Or maybe it could be that the reason that women are paid less than men, maybe it's because men are going into higher paying industries. Maybe men have more experience. Maybe men have more education. Or maybe men are just working hard. I'm just kind of throwing this all out there because those are some of the reasons that we hear. And that's okay. You should see disparities there. But what happens if men and women have the exact same job in the exact same industry, exact same job title, very, very similar education, experience, tenure, all of that, and you still see disparities? And not only are they disparities, they're significant and they're persistent over time, meaning they're several years. That is what we mean by an inequity. So an inequity is a significant disparity that's more than likely not happening by accident or merit, meaning something else is driving or shaping it, because we're controlling for all of those things: education, experience, all of those. And so that's what we mean when we say an inequity. And I always like to say, I'm going to quote Jill from yesterday, who says, if you don't have data, then all you have is an opinion, right? So that's what I want you to think about in terms of your communities. Don't argue about, is DEI good or bad? Argue about, what does the data look like in my municipality? Do we have the data? Do we know where, if there are significant disparities between different groups in our municipalities? And lead with the data. Don't focus on your feelings, focus on the facts of what the data says. Now, let me give you some areas to be able to consider and think about within your municipalities. So, town governments should proactively think about equity, because as servant leaders of your community, as as agents of governance in your community, we want to make sure that our municipalities are performing. Why? We have to be good stewards of taxpayer resources. We talk about not being wasteful. Our stakeholders are giving us these resources that we have to be good stewards of and manage accordingly. Now, there's 4 areas, 4 domains that I want you to think about in terms of where disparities, significant disparities, are called what again? Inequities. So significant disparities are called inequities. Now, where might inequities be in your municipalities? They might be in services and programs. So one of the things you want to look for is, does everyone have equitable access to services and programs? For example, a lot of municipalities may have rental assistance programs, but when you pull the data, you may only notice that 90% of these resources are going to one demographic group. But your municipality, when you look at the percentage of the demographics, it's multiple demographic groups, and it's very, it can be somewhat diverse, but the lion's share of this program and the resources are going to maybe one race, ethnicity, and maybe one gender. And you gotta ask yourself, now why is that? Why aren't other stakeholders in our community taking advantage of this rental assistance program? What is it? What could it be? So those are things to think about. Are all stakeholders treated fairly and respect by municipal employees? Are the quality of services and facilities equitable in different neighborhoods? In some neighborhoods now, depending on how small or large a municipality is, what we do know, sometimes in some neighborhoods you will see some segregation. A lot of times by race and ethnicity, but also a lot of times by income. Usually, municipalities that I've worked with before, you may see affordable housing maybe in this section of the city versus more affluent areas or on this side, north, south, east, or west. Now, smaller municipalities, again, it just kind of depends on what that looks like. But also, you may see that what we've seen is in some municipalities, cities, towns, counties that we work with, there sometimes is not the same level of quality of services, programs, even park equipment that I'll share with you some data on here as well. And it's not done intentionally. That's one thing also to think about. It's not like the department heads or park and rec directors or public works, they're not intentionally trying to deny, exclude, or harm certain groups. Sometimes it's about some people in communities, you all know this, some residents tend to have more influence, more access, and even certain neighborhoods maybe have more influence and access to elected officials, and able to get things done, able to make a phone call, or able to really make their voice heard in meetings as well. So services and programs is important. Is every municipality attracting the best talent? So employment is a big one where we see significant disparities, or we call inequities. Your town may be 80% white, 20% people of color. But what I've seen in municipalities that I work with, okay, you would expect to see about 80% of your employees be about white and about 20% people of color. But what happens when 99% of the employees are white? Right? I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but what we're saying is maybe there's some reason why the people of color aren't being able to get these certain types of jobs and for whatever reason. It could be a lot of different reasons why, but it's worth asking ourselves, why is that? Why would that? Doesn't mean anybody's being racist. What it does mean is that there may be some types of practices that may be unintentionally creating these barriers. And I'll give you one. One is employee referral programs. Public and the private sector has these. But some companies that I work with, if their company is largely one group, then what happens is, because we're very segregated all across the United States, even in Massachusetts, segregated by race and ethnicity where we live, but also as a result of that, our social and professional networks also tend to be very segregated. And jobs, there's 2 ways to get a good job in the United States. What you know, your education, but also, now you don't have any research on that, data on it, do you? But you know that. Why? Because you live in a society where you experience that. And here's the thing, if jobs are, 50 to 70% of all jobs are distributed through social and professional networks, And if your networks are segregated by race, ethnicity, and gender, that means some groups will hear about certain jobs, other groups won't hear about those jobs. And what should happen is none of these groups are being racist or sexist. It's a structural thing that's taking place that's perpetuating the inequities that you see. Purchasing and procurement, being cost effective with goods and services. Some vendors and contractors are getting the same contracts over and over and over again. Why? We know them, we're familiar with them, we're comfortable with them. We see that. So when we as select board members, we should be looking for this type of data and say, you know what? Do we have diverse vendors and contractors that are competing to get our municipality the lowest cost for these goods and services? Because it could be one vendor or contractor that's getting the same, and he or she is steadily increasing the price because they don't really have to truly compete because they have a little favoritism, right? But it's not doing what's best for the municipality. And a lot of times it's easy for procurement officers or department, it's easier to just kind of go with the status quo. We know them, we're familiar with them. But they're doing what's best for them, not what's best for the municipality. And of course, stakeholder engagement. Who sits on boards and committees? Again, if your municipality, whether you're 10,000, under 10,000, 20,000, whatever the size of your town is, ask yourself, do our boards and committees reflect the population of our city, of our town? Does it reflect that? And if it doesn't reflect that, why is that? Boards and committees can influence and shape policies and practices. So we should look for data on that as well. So those are 4 domains where we tend to see inequities within towns. Now, when it comes to equity, a lot of times this is assigned to either an equity officer or a human resource personnel manager or an assistant town administrator a lot of times. And what I want you to understand is that, equity is not one person's job. It really should be the mindset throughout all departments within a town. Police and fire, they need to understand, what does equity look like for us and what we do in our work? As you can see, public works, we have to ask ourselves, what does the public infrastructure look like throughout our town? And does it matter if this side of the town has, multifamily housing versus this side of the town who has, and our renters, they're kind of renters are kind of over here, and maybe all homeowners over here. Is the infrastructure just equity? Park and rec, human resources, economic development, financing, all departments can apply an equity mindset. And remember, an equity mindset is not about just, as we heard yesterday, Eddie Glaude said, it's not about being philanthropic. It's actually asking ourselves, are we doing what's best for the town, and how do we know? And we don't know unless we have the data to be able to look for that and show it. And every department can look for that as well. Okay. Oh, let me go back. Now, why must towns use an equity mindset? Well, every municipality in the United States, federal level, state level, local level, has significantly contributed to the inequities that we see today. Now, here's something to understand. Most of the policies historically in the United States were exclusionary policies, involved 2 categories: race and ethnicity and gender. None of us in this room are responsible for what happened in the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, of all the racial and gender exclusionary policies. None of us are responsible for that. But guess what? We all inherited a society that was structured in a way where some racial groups were at the top and others at the bottom. Some gender groups were at the top and others at the bottom. Well, I'll say one gender group was at the top. You can't say some, gotta be honest. So here's the thing, none of us were responsible for doing that, but we all inherited that. And so now we have to work together collaboratively and say, how can we make sure that everyone has an opportunity to achieve their greatest potential, whatever that is. And that means If I'm a business owner and I'm in a municipality, I should have and I pay taxes, I should have a fair opportunity to compete for a town contract. I should. I'm paying taxes, I'm a resident. But I don't if I'm seeing one or two contractors get in over and over again and they belong to this demographic group. That's not fair. That's what we mean when we say that. So there's structural advantage and disadvantage as well. What we mean by that is, even after all of the exclusionary policies, after the civil rights, all those different acts, what we have to understand is that society was structured in a way, very segregated. That means social and professional networks were segregated, but also biases emerged. What we mean by that is that biases emerge where there's a reason why, if I were to ask you, what does an administrative assistant look like? If I were to ask you that, you think about it for a moment, you'd probably say, well, it's a woman. Now here's the thing, you don't have any research or data on that, do you? You don't have any. Now I do, because I pull this stuff. 95% of administrative assistants are women. You gotta ask yourself, why is that? Women just like being administrative assistants and men don't. Maybe that's because women were only allowed to be administrative assistants, flight attendants, nurses for 100 years. 1865, 1964, women were only allowed to work in certain categories. Now biases emerge from that. Now there are some men who say, I'm not working in that job. Why? That's a woman's job. I'm not saying all men think that, but some do. That's how biases emerge. When you only allow certain groups to be CEOs, select men, before it was select board, they were select men, right? When you only allow certain groups to be in certain positions, we get used to seeing those groups in those positions, and we automatically think that's what a CEO looks like. That's what an administrative assistant looks like. This is what a business owner in this community looks like. So that's how biases emerge. And biases are a part of being human, by the way. That's just what makes us human. But there's consequences because we put people in categories. Now let me give you some examples of town exclusionary policies. A lot of towns had a concept called warning out. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of warning out. Okay, a couple of you have. So warning out was a concept that was practiced in a lot of towns, even after they were incorporated, several decades, where undesirables, race, ethnicity, poor, people who really couldn't take care of themselves, would be warned out of a town. They would be warned out by selectmen, or constables would be escorted them out. If they had a certain amount of time to move out of town within those towns and municipalities. A lot of people aren't aware of this history. You add that with redlining, which I'm sure you've heard of, racial restrictive covenants, which segregated a lot of the towns that we see. A lot of people don't realize that a lot of cities and towns outside of Boston look the way they do, not by personal preference or choice. Okay? And we have the data on that to be able to show that as well. If you take Boston, and you start around right after World War II, late 40s, 50s, and 60s, when the greater towns and suburbs were really starting to develop. You see certain groups, you see whites in Boston were relocating out to the suburbs. All of this was facilitated by a lot of opportunity, development. Jobs were going out there, development. Mortgages were allowed only for whites during this time. And as the suburbs are being developed, other groups want to move out too, primarily blacks, because during this time, before 1965, the country was largely black and white. But during this time, other groups were not allowed to move into those areas. And so now, a couple of things are happening. Development is occurring in these towns. Also, housing values are going up like crazy. And the other groups are locked out of these opportunities. So by 1970, as you see here, the majority of towns, with the exception of Cambridge, were 98% white by 1970. Keep in mind, it was legal to do this up until 1968, when you could discriminate where people live up until 1968. So the structure for all of the towns were already set and established by race ethnicity. Now that it's illegal to do that after 1968, well, guess what? Now people can't afford to go live in a lot of these towns because the structure was already set. The Boston Foundation did a survey in 1975. 30-40% of Black Bostonians in Roxbury, certain areas, they wanted to move out to the suburbs, but they weren't allowed to. So towns are increasingly becoming more diverse as well. And I want you to just kind of show you here two maps. One is what the share of people of color looks like in 1990. You see the yellow, the yellow images here. It shows that it's 0 to 4. It's very little people of color where you see a lot of yellow. Anywhere you see the purple, the orange, you start to see that's largely people of color. There's only about 11 municipalities where people of color are the majority in Massachusetts. But you can see over time in 2018, it's becoming increasingly diverse. And you're seeing that. And also, I asked you this question earlier, are we attracting and selecting the best talent for employment? Here's an example of data or an analysis. And where you see it says town workforce representation, this is the representation by racial group of an example town that has 10,000 residents. As you can see here, the town is the people who work for the town are 95.7% white. However, the availability, meaning the availability is, what do the demographics look like for people who could work in town government in surrounding cities and towns? Because one thing we know is that people who live in the town, people who work for the town don't always live within the town. They live in surrounding other areas. In this example, you can see the availability is about 72% white and about 37.7% people of color. So what we're saying here is that this would be a significant disparity. Here's another way to look at this. It's just showing you the results by the town workforce on who's overrepresented. Anything above 100 is overrepresented. Anything below 80%, that dotted line, is what we would call an inequity. Now I'm just showing you inequities primarily for race and ethnicity because those are usually the largest inequities that we see, followed by gender inequities. Here's an example from a town from 15,000 residents. Again, the availability for the town is about 66% white, but the town's workforce is about 95% white. So what we're saying here is that there's an opportunity to expand the pool of talent to not just say, okay, well, when I open up a job and I get 20 applications and I narrow those down and they all look like the same demographic group, I gotta ask myself, okay, we need to expand this pool of talent and be able to reach out to other organizations, associations. So when we have a group to choose from, we should see whites, blacks, Asians, Hispanics, different age groups. Now we can ask ourselves, okay, you know what? Who's the best and most qualified person for the job? Now that we have a good range of qualified people, potentially qualified people to select from. That's what we mean when we say, are we attracting the best talent? Because a lot of times we may just have friends and family members referring other people who they know. And just referring people who we know doesn't mean we're necessarily getting the best talent. And these are just some other examples of just what it looks like for different job groups. Not only should you look for overall representation, a lot of times you may see a lot of certain groups work for a particular town, but when you look at who's in management, who's not in management, you may also see inequity. So those are other areas that you want to look for as well. I'm gonna move on just for the sake of time, so I want to open up for questions. Vendors and suppliers as well. Here's an example of procurement data of a city that had 80,000 residents. As you can see, how much 82% of this city's procurement dollars, person procurement, is going to white male-owned businesses. Okay, and here you can see the availability is about 85%, 14%. So 14% minority owned. So most of this is going to white male-owned and white female-owned businesses, but we see the availability for minority-owned businesses is close to about 15%, but right now it's only about 5% for this particular city. And this was just taken up from a variety of different counties and that availability. So I just want you to understand what inequities really mean and where they typically are. And they're in cities and towns, not just in Massachusetts, but all over the United States. And one reason why they're not being addressed is that people aren't looking at the data. They just think that, oh, everybody's got a fair chance. No, it's when we look at the data, you say, wow, maybe people don't have a fair chance. Okay. And the rest of this will just be, you all get a copy of these slides, just showing that in procurement, this is showing that municipalities all over the United States have procurement inequities. Community surveys. Here's a community survey of 10,000 residents. Community surveys are very important. Asking residents of towns and then breaking it out by demographic group. As you can see here, there's a lot of agreement on access to fire, police, and being treated fairly and respectfully. But you can see here where people of color and whites in this particular town had some statistically significant different opinions on terms of having access to provide input on the town's budget, policies, and seeing themselves reflected in town government and activities. So get the data is what I'm really trying to emphasize. Don't just assume that everything is okay. All right. So now I'm going to open it up, because I know I went a little over time. I'll open it up for just a few questions and comments as well. I want to give you all some time for that. Sorry, Annika, I know I'm trying to run over a little bit, so we'll open it up for questions and comments.
Morning, great brief. Mike Curry, Chair for the Select Board in Templeton. You say get the data. Can I start there?
Yep.
The website?
Start where? I'm sorry?
The website there. So getting data. I know that like one of the vendors out there, ClearGov,
Okay.
mines some of the data or otherwise. So where do we start to get the data?
Yeah, so a lot of it, well, first of all, when you look at two areas, I would look at employment and procurement first. If your town, if you have more than 100 employees, you have to collect data by race ethnicity for employees. It's a federal requirement by the EEOC. So now if you're less than that, you can still, you can basically survey your employees, have a form, survey your employees, make it self-voluntary, and we'll make this available as well. You make it voluntary to survey your employees to see, and ask the volunteer, tell them why you're doing this though first. It's really important. And you want to make a commitment to and make sure everybody has a fair chance. Also in procurement, Chapter 30B requires you to keep for 5 or 6 years vendor name, contract size, but also add another form to those RFPs, those bid packages. Add a voluntary race ethnicity form. You have to track that data anyway. All you're adding is one more demographic, race ethnicity as well, to be able to track that. Services and programs, really the only way to get that data is if your departments are having some type of resident satisfaction survey. If not, consider doing a community-wide survey. And think about costs. You can try to administer it yourself. There's free survey platforms you can use. But if you want to be able to bring in a third-party consultant to be able to do that, you can do that as well. So
Census data, I know.
Census data is available.
Okay.
Absolutely. For population demographics.
Start, okay.
Yep.
Great.
Yep. Absolutely. Yep.
I'm just gonna pretend I have heels on today. Lynn Fiddler, Town of Marshfield, Select Board. Thank you so much for everything that you bring to the table. I'm in a position where we're constantly trying to work on our talent pool. Everybody understands the importance of our boards and commissions, and we try to generate a talent pool that meets all of these topics, and it's a challenge. And I don't know, I've been trying to wrap my head for the last couple of years of how to go about the process and increase the talent pool, get the word out, because these boards and commissions have a major role in the fabric of our community, and diversity and their input to how we run our town is so critical. But I don't know, I'm sure there are other folks here that could help with that mindset of how we do a better job at working on our talent pool, not necessarily maybe in employment for the actual municipality. So if you could maybe offer some.
Talking about for more of the boards and commissions?
Exactly.
Yeah, so part of it is sometimes there's, you may have a significant amount of people of color, let's say in your municipality, but not joining boards and commissions. And a lot of times for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes people are less likely to want to, first of all, there's barriers. We do know that people who join boards and commissions who also attend public meetings usually have higher socioeconomic status. They usually have more wealth, more income, retired, and they're usually older, a whole lot older. We see that. We see other groups could be having 2 or 3 jobs, could be just trying to make ends meet within a municipality because of the higher cost of living or rent, whatever it is, and really just too busy. So we have to look for diverse ways for people to be able to participate on boards, and not just traditional ways as well, but also some people don't attend because they don't see people who looks like them, so it kind of starts this treadmill where we're trying to get people in, but they don't see people who look like them, so they're less likely to join. Really just focus on making ourselves inclusive and welcoming, starting just with the website. Do people see people, small things like in website, newsletter, do people see themselves reflected? I live in a city where I watched for 1 year, I subscribed to the newsletter, and I'm like, every time they send out a newsletter, I see nobody looks like me. Nobody looks like my kids. They're not doing this intentionally. They're probably just not even thinking about it, that the city is more than just this demographic group. So just starting with the language on the website, we're welcoming, we're inclusive, we want to start there, start with how you frame it, start with events and activities, bringing people together. A lot of times when you do things for kids, having like block party type events, people will come out, there's a chance to engage and get people out, make people aware of those boards and commission opportunities as well. So you have to do some non-traditional ways of being able to do that. So I'm gonna move to the next question.
I want to say that there are instances in municipalities across the state where discrimination is still occurring. There's a town that basically waged a 4 or 5 year battle to.
I'm sorry, if you could just get to your question really quick.
All right.
Sorry about that.
All right. So I guess the question is, on surveys, how do you generate a robust response? Because anytime that I've looked at the demographics of who's actually responding to these surveys, they're primarily older, retired, wealthy, and very few are minimal minorities included. The usefulness of a survey as a tool, I don't know how you get it when you're not getting a reflective response.
Right, yeah.
How do you generate that?
Meet people where they are. Don't think about where people are. Make it easy as well. Think about younger, QR codes, social media. Think about where people are. Meet them where they are as well to try to generate that interest. Keep in mind, this is the first survey. Probably not going to get it the first time, but a lot of times when people see it as you meet people, keep in mind in addition to surveys, you can do focus groups. You might be able to meet with community leaders, students even. Incentives, things like that as well, small little incentives. So again, think non-traditional ways of how you can be able to try to meet people where they are as well. That's one way. So
I've tried that. We've handed out surveys to parents at schools and everything. We just do not get the response for basically anybody under 35. They'll get maybe 1 out of, and the rest of the responses are not. Old, or are older.
Last one, I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm Laura Childs. I'm from Rockland. I'm on the Select Board. And I'm a diehard advocate of trust building and reaching out to people of color within our community, which is ever growing, and I think it's fantastic. But there's other people in town that only look at how things can fiscally benefit them. Do you have data on how DEI can fiscally benefit a town?
How it can fiscally benefit a town?
Yeah,
that's a good question. I know we fiscally benefit a town. I'm trying to think what I come to mind right now.
Yeah, like save money.
Okay, yeah. So definitely within employment and definitely within procurement. I don't think I have anything on top of my head when it comes to like services and programs. But again, it's not, let's just stay with employment and procurement. We do have it on that because the goal is now you're having people compete more.
Right.
You're not just, favoritism can be costly, say it that way.
Right, I mean, but I would love something that I could
Okay.
hopefully show at one of my board meetings to the public, like.
Sure.
We need to, you guys complain about taxes going up, et cetera, so if we include if we have a DEI, at least a committee, if we can't afford a department at this time.
We'll see if we can get that to you. Yeah. All right. Thank you. We'll make a note of that where you're from. Okay. And I'm going to turn it back over now to Andrew. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bird. And as you know, MMA is doing more DEI work, so there'll be more resources and information coming out for you through MMA shortly. Two quick announcements, one request. We've got upcoming webinars or events for you. The first is March 8th, which is going to be about property tax equity and new programs to help lower income residents pay their property taxes. The Empowerment Bill has some of these ideas in it, so that'll be March 8th with the head of the Assessors Group and Division of Local Services. Second is on April 6th, we'll be having our fourth Rural and Western Massachusetts Conference. It'll be held in Northampton. It's a half-day conference. It's been well received in past years, so please book for that. And last is a request. We try to put on webinars, programs that interest you. We would love to hear from you what you want to hear about. So I'm here, the board is here, Atticus is here, or by email. We want to make sure we pick the right thing to talk about. So if there are things on your mind you think you want a lesson about, whether it's DEI or the tax stuff or whatever it is, let us know and try to make sure the package fits your needs. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you very much. Take care.